Now that we've talked about the concepts in the abstract, let's talk about putting them into practice. Because art is challenging to reproduce results. But I found that if you have some sort of a repeatable structure, you're just going to have a better time of coming to good results every time. And so the way I like to do that is to iterate through small changes. So the first step, as we talked about before, was starting with a silhouette, because this is the initial read. This, at a shape level, is going to tell us a lot about the character. Now here's where the iteration comes into play. Obviously, I'm not going to take all of these designs. I only need to design one character. So I'm going to take my two favorites, and they are going to live on to the next round. The rest of them, I don't need them anymore, so I'll save them for later. Now I'll take these two, and I will clone them a bunch of times across a new document. And now I'm going to get slightly more specific. I'm going to take what I've already decided and move on to more and more detailed. So here I can try a couple of different directions. One way I love to go with this is called a value pattern. Here's where you keep the silhouette exactly the same, and you give yourself a light and a dark value, and you fill out the shape. So here you're only working with interior design. And this is just like a 2D design composition. You're thinking of graphic shapes. Because when you realize the final version of this model, it might be that the dark is not armored and the light is armored. Or maybe dark and light are just two different colors of paint. However you end up doing it though, this gives an initial read that is a pleasing composition. Because if your character works in a value pattern, it will work no matter how much more detail you add on top. But maybe you don't want to work with value. Maybe what you want to work with is line. So instead, you could take those initial silhouettes and then just draw interior lines. And in this way, you're going to explore without any value at all, but just linear shapes. Now, whether you're doing a value pattern or a linear pattern, either way, you are taking what you already knew from the first stage, which was the exterior shape, and then you are getting more and more specific. And then just like before, you will pick one or two of them, and they will live on to the next round. So here I decided to go with the linear route, and I picked one that I liked best. And the next stage was just refinement. Here I knew I was pretty close, but I wanted to try out a couple different things. So at this point I did alter the proportions ever so slightly. I changed around the interior shapes a bit, and ultimately I came up with this on the right. This is the final lines. But you notice that this stage was not starting from scratch. I'd already decided a lot of different things through this iteration process. So once I was happy with the front of this character, I then drew the back of the character and laid them out in pairs across a new document. Once again, time to give myself some choices. So I tried out a variety of different color palettes. And I've only shown 6 of my favorites here, but I did a lot of these because these are really quick and they're just a great way to try out options and see what sticks. And then once I was happy with one of these, I decided to take it further and to think about material. If this were just a cartoon character, there really wouldn't be material. This would probably be the last phase I did. But since I need my character to be more realistic, I needed to think about the surface definition. Is it glossy? Is it muddy? Is it semi-gloss? All these things say something different about your character. Because if you were to walk down the aisle at the cell phone store, each phone has an ever so slightly different finish, and they really have a different feeling as a result. Some might seem fancier, some might seem more rugged. These materials really matter when it comes to making a statement. So it's worth taking this stage and trying out a mix and match of different types of materials. And as you're looking at these, it's starting to get more and more refined. And that's because I'm allowing myself to get more and more specific. But ultimately, I'm not working slowly. I still have to draw a lot of different things, so it's in my best interest if I draw them quickly. Well, a great way to do that is to work with layers, to work in a modular way. Because really, I'm just mixing and matching here. To get the result on the right, I added together a shiny version plus a bit of a dirt overlay, and then ended up with shiny and dirt. So if you look back at my material ideas here, they're all mixed and matched. I'm combining different base coats and then different amounts of gloss and dirt. And then to come up with these final results, I'm just layering them with different amounts of opacity. So I'm not really drawing all of these options. All I'm really doing is recombining in order to create different results. So I'm using the digital process to its fullest. Now the truth is you don't always go in a forward direction with this iteration. Because at the end of this stage, I looked back at my colors and said, you know what? I kind of like that darker one. So at this point, I took a step back, and then I did an entirely new material sheet based on the darker paint color. But since I had already made my dirt overlays and my shiny chrome, it really wasn't very hard to make this. It was really just more mixing and matching. But ultimately, this is the sheet that I decided to go with. Because looking at all of my different materials and my colors, I kind of like this darker one better. So I finally chose one of the material explorations, and that was it. It makes the cut, the rest get thrown away, and then I do my final render. But to do the final render at this point is easy, because I've made all those hard decisions. Now I don't have to worry about changing my mind or changing colors. That's all been decided. It's just increasing the resolution, adding in those extra details and a little bit of polish, and then my character's done. Because so much of the time spent in an illustration is making up your mind. First you want to go red, and then you change your mind and want it to be blue. The benefit of working this way is that you force yourself to get all those changes out of your system when it's small and rough. Because deciding to make those changes when things are already very detailed is expensive. If you can instead make those changes when it's a thumbnail, you have made a much more efficient use of your time. And finally, I love this method of iteration because it's great for teams. Maybe the team is you and your client. Maybe it's you and an art director. Or potentially if you work at a game studio or in visual effects, the team is you and a bunch of other artists. The reason this works so well with a team is because it has these necessary stopping points. Once you've finished a sheet and you're ready to make a choice, maybe you just call the art director over and say, what do you think? Which color scheme is working? And then you can have a discussion because you're comparing one to one. If you're just looking at one character and critiquing it, it's a little harder to compare. But if instead you're looking at a sheet of similar alternatives, our brains are actually really wired to make these choices. It's really easy to compare like to like. So really working in this way methodically solves visual problems. Either if it's you and an art director, or you and a whole team, this is a way to work out the challenges and come to that nice visual solution. And then once you do, the polish is easy.